Thanks so much for joining us. This is our continuing coverage of President Trump's D.C. takeover. I'm producer Chris. If you're not familiar, what we're doing each night is recapping some of the major developments that have happened in the 24 hours since, in this case, since it's Monday, from over the weekend as well. Also highlighting some of our Fox 5 coverage over the course of these 30 days that the president has declared this emergency, this crime crisis here in the nation's capital. We are talking to city leaders. We are hearing from city leaders. We are talking to people out in the community as well. We are covering the protests as they happen, and we're bringing you any sort of live events as they're going on. Each night and each day, there have been shows of force by these federal agents. We have shown you live. We have shown you some of the homeless encampments that have been broken down as that has happened as well. I mentioned that we'd be bringing you some of the major developments as they happen, and we had several major developments over the course of this weekend and just here today in the last few hours. First, though, today marks 1 week since President Trump declared that emergency and his emergency plans to federalize the city's police department, deploy the National Guard across the district, and in his words, make the city safe again and make D.C. beautiful again. He invokes Section 740 of the D.C. Home Rule to federalize the D.C. Police Department. The administration had taken action to try to basically strip power from Chief Pamela Smith. However, Attorney General Brian Schwab filed a lawsuit, an emergency lawsuit, a temporary restraining order against that action on Friday. A judge agreed with them, and they've reached a decision. However, things changing and evolving every single day. Federal officials say so far their efforts have been a success. Attorney General Pam Bondi, I just mentioned her. She said in a post on X that since the president's takeover began, there have been nearly 400 arrests. You see the post right there. Washington, D.C. is getting safer every night thanks to our law enforcement partners. Just this weekend, 137 arrests were made. 21 illegal firearms were seized in total. There have been nearly 400 arrests, and we are not slowing down. We are committed to making D.C. safe again. At the same time, FBI Director Kash Patel says his agents made 29 arrests in D.C. overnight. He says other federal officials made a total of 69 arrests. This is just overnight, Sunday into Monday, seized 4 firearms. Now, President Trump marked the 1 week milestone with a new Truth Social post. Let me pull that up for you. He says in it, he called out the city's crime numbers ahead of the surge. He also celebrated the federal show of force. You see the post, the Trump's Truth Social post right there. D.C. gave fake crime numbers in order to create a false illusion of safety. This is a very bad and dangerous thing to do, and they are under serious investigation for doing so. Until 4 days ago, Washington, D.C. was the most unsafe city in the United States and perhaps the world. Now, in just a short period of time, it is perhaps the safest and getting better every single hour. People are flocking to D.C. again, and soon the beautification will begin. Now, the president also addressed the situation in the nation's capital during a White House Q&A with reporters that happened after his meeting with the president of Ukraine and other European leaders, and I want you to take a listen to that.
We have a thing going on right now in D.C. We went from the most unsafe place anywhere to a place that now friends are calling me up, Democrats are calling me up, and they're saying, sir, I want to thank you. My wife and I went out to dinner last night for the first time in 4 years, and Washington, D.C. is safe, and you did that in 4 days. I'll tell you it's safe. I had another friend of mine, he has a son who's a great golfer, he's on tour, and he came in 4th yesterday in the big tournament where Scotty Scheffler made the great shot, and he said his son is going to dinner in Washington, D.C. tonight. I said, would you have allowed that to happen a year ago? He said, no way, no way. He said, what you've done is incredible. And I think the people realize it. But the press says He's a dictator. He's trying to take over. No, all I want is security for our people. But people that haven't gone out to dinner in Washington, D.C. in 2 years are going out to dinner. And the restaurants the last 2 days were busier than they've been in a long time. Thank you.
So that was President Trump at the White House earlier today talking about the current situation here in D.C., his efforts to make the city safe again. You heard him also mention the restaurants, but the numbers don't actually back up his claim. In fact, restaurant reservations in the district have plunged. They've taken a huge plunge since President Trump ordered the National Guard to come to the city. Data from OpenTable, the website OpenTable, found the number of diners dropped by 31% in the 2 days after the takeover began. DC's restaurant scene had seen 11 consecutive months of improvement in reservation numbers since the pandemic. As of yesterday, the district had the biggest drop in August reservations among the largest 20 U.S. cities tracked by OpenTable. So this is actually summer restaurant week here in D.C. This is a time of year when restaurants really try to get people in the restaurants because August is a slow time. So it's traditionally a slow time. Restaurants are desperately trying to get diners into their restaurants. However, they say that some of these efforts, all of these federal agents across the city, are hurting business. So Fox 5's Homa Bash talked to some restaurant owners earlier this evening at 5 o'clock about the impact the president's takeover has had. Take a listen.
Yeah, absolutely, Jim. Some restaurant owners telling me they're not seeing any of the impacts just yet. Others say they definitely are, and diners are telling them they feel this sense of unease. Here's the president speaking from the White House about this just a few hours ago.
Now friends are calling me up, Democrats are calling me up, and they're saying, sir, I want to thank you. My wife and I went out to dinner last night for the first time in 4 years, and Washington, D.C. is safe, and you did that in 4 days.
All right, now take a look at this data from OpenTable, the online reservation system. According to them, online reservations are down in D.C. since last Monday, anywhere from 16% to 31% per day compared to last year. And it shows cities like New York, Miami, and Houston, they're all trending up. We know restaurants in the district have been dealing with so many factors playing into decreased foot traffic lately. Rising rents, Initiative 82, higher cost of goods, and federal worker layoffs, just to name a few. Now you're going to hear from two restaurant owners. Daniel Kramer runs Duke's Grocery, home of the Proper Burger, and Khalid Pitts co-owns Cork Wine Bar in Northwest. They've been in the neighborhood for 18 years.
The firing of federal workers, the uneasiness of what's going on, we've seen it drip by drip by drip, but we have not felt that visceral impact as what's happening on our streets. And not just theoretically happening in these streets, it's happening right outside these doors. This is happening to people who live in this community.
Last week, the streets were a little bit quieter, but again, it's mid-August. It was kind of hot. So I can't put, my finger on that one factor. Certainly, I understand where guests are coming from. We do. We are here for them.
Now, here's the message I got from every restaurant owner I talked to. If you want to come out and support them, do that. Enjoy a meal. Restaurant Week runs through Sunday. There are more than 350 places that are taking part. It's a good way to find a new favorite or revisit an old one. Guys.
So that was Fox 5's Homa Bash talking to some local restaurant owners and employees about the current situation. They say they've seen a drop in foot traffic. It could be the fact that it's just a slow time of year. Others say it's the federal show of force. Now, just a few blocks away from where Homa was reporting this afternoon, a group of protesters, a couple dozen of them actually gathered for a Free DC rally. They called on residents in all 8 wards of the city to send an audible message to the Trump administration, and they asked them to do that by banging pots and pans on the street every night of the 30-day surge for 5 full minutes starting at 8 p.m. So if you heard that tonight and were wondering why, that could have been it. But you see those protesters out there singing, chanting, clapping, holding their signs, calling on President Trump to free D.C. Now, we mentioned some other major developments that have happened over the weekend and today. Over the weekend, the governors of South Carolina, West Virginia, and Ohio, they said they would deploy hundreds more National Guard troops to assist the 800 that are already, the 800 and change who are already patrolling the city. However, they didn't say why they would be adding more. Just a few hours ago, though, we learned that Louisiana, Mississippi, and Tennessee will also be sending troops to the nation's capital. Now, as we told you last week, the National Guard members are not making arrests. They are supposed to be here as a deterrent. They are supposed to be a visible show of force, but they do not have arresting powers. However, White House officials tell Fox 5 over the weekend that those troops may now be armed. Originally, we were told that they would not be. Earlier today, during an event celebrating back-to-school season here in Washington, D.C., the mayor talked about that aspect with reporters. She also talked about why she thinks the president needs to be more honest in the descriptions of the operations, acknowledging that they aren't just about curtailing crime, violent crime like he has said, but about immigration enforcement. Take a listen.
Can you tell us how you feel about the additional National Guard troops coming from other states, West Virginia, South Carolina, Ohio? Do you feel that this has kind of usurped your authority even more, given the president's federalization efforts?
We don't have any authority over the D.C. Guard or any other guards, but I think it is kind of makes the point that this is not about D.C. crime.
Thank you, Mayor. Jenny Gathright with the Washington Post. There's been video of ICE arrests, spreading all across social media, particularly one at 14th and R Northwest over the weekend, where ICE agents tackled a delivery driver and took him into custody. I guess, what's your reaction when you're seeing these videos in the city, how they're affecting people? And then a follow-up, given that the judge in the lawsuit has yet to officially rule on whether MPD will be forced to cooperate with ICE, what do you want MPD officers to be doing in the meantime as they're going around the city and potentially being asked to cooperate with these kinds of arrests?
So let me start. I don't want to comment on individual incidents because I won't have all of the details. I will say this, however, the focus should be on violent crime, and that's what has been promoted, that we're focusing on violent criminals and violent offenders and violence. And nobody is against focusing on driving down any level of violence. And so if this is really about immigration enforcement, I think the administration should make that plain. Yeah.
Sorry. You've talked a lot about how one of your goals is just steering the city to the other side of this administration with its home rule intact. Given the current situation, do you think the city's home rule is at risk, and how are you reflecting on this moment as it sort of seems like it's some of your concerns or potential concerns about this administration are starting to be realized?
I don't think my concerns are not new, all right? And I think anybody who has followed the rhetoric from the campaign throughout these attacks and the rhetoric around them is not new. Yep.
Marielle Carbone with DC News Now. I'm just wondering if you've had any conversations over the last week with your federal partners just about agents identifying themselves, having their faces covered. It's a concern we're hearing and seeing out on the streets.
We have. I think I mentioned that last week about being very important to us that agents be identified. I did ask the chief to have further conversation about these masks. There's no reason for a law enforcement official to be masked.
Did she get any response on that?
I asked her to talk to it. I will continue to have to follow up.
Brad Bell with Channel 7. A couple questions.
Yep.
Some messaging coming from the administration, the White House today, saying that D.C. is being made safer, and they put out some arrest numbers and numbers of guns being seized. How would you characterize this operation? Has it made D.C. safer?
MPD takes guns off the street every day and every week. And any time you have a surge of officers, I would expect that you have some results. I say repeatedly, we need 500 more officers in D.C. With 500 more officers, get 500 more officers worth of results. And so what is not necessary, however, is this kind of commandeering of the attempted commandeering of the force itself, and the expanded, I think, work that is not related to violence.
So additionally, with this, the takeover, what coordination is there? There's this
Well,
man Terry Cole out there.
Let me correct you. There is no takeover. What there is a surge in federal law enforcement. And that surge in federal law enforcement necessarily has to coordinate with the Metropolitan Police Department under the leadership of Pamela Smith, the Chief of Police.
Are they coordinating to your satisfaction?
I think there's going to be work to be done, for sure. But, you know, there's work to be done. Yes.
We've heard that are distributing weapons to these soldiers.
That's a question for the Department of the Army.
Well, you must be concerned about that since they're not trained in law enforcement.
They can't do law enforcement as far as I know.
So it's got to be concerning to you that if they're armed.
That is not what I have been advised, and unless their orders have somehow changed, I don't know that they can engage in arrest. Yes.
If I can follow up.
Yes, sure.
Is there any coordination between your office and the White House, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel?
Yes.
But are you getting the answers to your questions, or is it not as clear as you would like it?
I think we're 7 or 8 days into this situation, and it evolves.
What does that mean?
It means just what I said.
It's evolving, or it evolves?
I'm not going to get into the difference in suffixes
Mayor,
with you.
Mayor Bowser.
Well, yes, it's changed from day to day. Let me put it that way.
So that was DC's mayor speaking about the federal surge, denying the use of the phrase takeover, talking about the president's efforts to crack down on immigration. We know the administration has ordered local police to cooperate with federal agents on immigration enforcement, and those orders actually would contradict local laws prohibiting such collaborations. There was an executive order about that as well. You heard the mayor also talk about the National Guard and whether or not they have the ability to make arrests. That was a concern that Tom Fitzgerald talked to a retired Army member about earlier this evening as well. Now, DC's mayor is not the only city leader speaking out. I mentioned Tom Fitzgerald yesterday. He had a chance to talk to DC Council member Robert White on his weekend show On the Hill, all about this federal takeover and why he thinks Virginians should actually be upset with their governor, Governor Youngkin, and his support of the president's move. Tom also talked to Council Chair Phil Mendelson, who explained why he was actually worried about the future of DC's home rule. Take a listen.
Council member, obviously this has been a tumultuous week here in the district. Just put me in your shoes for a moment as you've walked around the district. What have you seen out of the protesters and the police that are now on the streets of this city?
Tom, increasing every day in D.C. Our military and federal officers increasing every day in D.C. is not surprisingly at all. People protesting and pushing back. I believe that the president is deliberately inciting this pushback in order to push harder against DC residents. But I think most of us know what's happening, so I'm continuing to encourage residents to stay calm and organized.
Are these protests going to make a difference, or is the administration just going to do what it wants?
Look, we've seen from this administration that it has a plan and it's going to do what it wants. What's happening here is that the president of the United States, the most powerful person in our country, is bullying DC telling federal troops and federal officers to beat up people in D.C. This strikes me as incredibly and eerily similar to what we're seeing from Putin, except that Putin is not doing it in his own country.
Now, this court case that was won by D.C. Attorney General Brian Schwab effectively kept D.C. Police Chief Pamela Smith as the chief of the D.C. Police Department. But is she really in charge if there are hundreds of federal officers spread out throughout this district right now, seemingly to do what they want when they want?
The Chief Smith is the chief, and she is in charge, and residents should reach out to 911, our local police. But what's happening is this surge of federal officers, including troops coming to D.C., making D.C. look like a militarized zone. And we are hearing from governors volunteering to send their state troops to D.C. And I have to say that I was particularly bothered by a statement from Governor Youngkin from Virginia that insulted and demeaned D.C., calling us a crime-ridden city. And Tom, when I checked the facts, you know what I found? That there are parts of Virginia with higher crime rates than in D.C. And I'm not talking about stealing bicycles. I'm talking about murder. So we have people in glass houses throwing stones at democracy. As a D.C. resident, I am upset to hear this from a regional partner. But if I were a Virginia resident, I'd be pissed because the Virginia governor just gave permission for the president to do the same thing in Virginia.
Yeah, but Councilmember, you well know there may be some more stones coming at your glass house. Your neighbors in West Virginia have already announced they're sending federal troops in. Governor Mike DeWine in Ohio is sending troops in. Are you prepared for other Republican governors across this country getting in on this and surging what is already a formidable force?
This is happening right now, Tom. So what we need is, while, yes, there are Republican governors sending troops to D.C. as D.C. is being used as a political pawn for the president and a different agenda that is not democracy, we need those who believe in democracy, whether you are Democrats or Republicans, to push back with us, because the president has said very clearly at his press conference on Monday that what he is doing in D.C., he intends to do in other states. So Republicans who believe that, who don't believe in big government, this is big government with boots on. For Democrats, he is coming to your cities and states next. So this is the breach point. This is the point where people have to push back. I know statehood and D.C. autonomy has not been the priority for the average American before, but I hope people understand what happens after this if the president is successful in his hostile takeover of D.C.
Well, as you know, the president was asked about D.C. statehood this past week, and he rejected that out of hand. D.C. Councilmember Robert White joining us live this morning on the Hill. Councilmember, we appreciate your time. Obviously, this has been an historic week. This has been a tumultuous week. Were you surprised by this? The mayor said she wasn't surprised by the takeover.
I think we can be both, surprised and not surprised. So the attacks on home rule are not new, but the extent of what happened, especially over the course of the week, was very disturbing. And it was harmful to the city, because what people hear around the country is the city is the worst in terms of crime in the world, not just the United States. And that's scary to people, and that hurts business, that hurts economic activity. And we know that factually that's not correct.
Was the triggering event for this the carjacking or the attempted carjacking of the individual who used to work for Elon Musk's Doge?
Well, I don't want to try to get in the head of the president, so I don't know if that's what the triggering event was. I mean, I've heard a lot of explanations, a distraction to try to change what the news is, but I think the bottom line is that the district has a different status vis-a-vis the federal government than any other city or state. We are a federal district under the Constitution. And so the federal government has the ability to do things with the district that they can't do anywhere. And that's historical. I mean, the first emancipation under Abraham Lincoln was in the district, not the Emancipation Proclamation. things can happen in the district that can't happen, that the federal government can't do elsewhere.
How concerned are you right now about the larger question of a home rule? Because there is currently legislation in the House and the Senate right now, co-sponsored between Senator Mike Lee and Congressman Andy Ogles, which would end home rule. Could that happen?
Well, I'm very concerned. At the same time, I don't want to be alarmist. I think that the senator and the congressman don't know what they're asking. Running a $21 billion government, taking over entirely. The federal government didn't do a good job when they had control for a century. The government needs to be much more connected to the citizenry it governs, and that's a tall order. On the other hand, there's no question we've seen an erosion, increasing attacks on the district and its self-governance, and so that is concerning.
A lot of talk has gone on about the 2023 crime spike, but there was something that took place before the crime spike that got a lot of attention and not in a good way to the district, which the council was very involved in. It was the revision of the criminal code in 2022, which critics said reduced penalties, got rid of some sentencing, and was just too soft on crime to the point where Democrats and then President Biden overturned the entire thing despite the fact that the mayor had vetoed it. The council overruled her veto. Was that a mistake? Did that help put you on this road to where you are right now?
Well, I do think that that controversy hurt the district in terms of its members of Congress feeling emboldened to attack the district. I disagree with regard to the merits. I think actually the criminal code reform strengthened our criminal code, but it's very easy to demagogue public safety and crime. It's very easy to do that. And you can cherry pick a particular crime and say, oh, look, they reduced the maximum sentence from 47 years, which nobody ever got, to 25 years, which most people weren't getting. So it's a fraught issue, but public safety has always been a top issue for the federal government.
As the council chair, you occupy a position where you have to deal big picture and with individuals who are on that council. Some of them are to the left of you, some of them might be a little bit to the right of you. Moving forward, does this council need to keep an eye on 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue with the knowledge that anything you do could trigger another response like what we've seen over the last couple of days?
I think the council and the mayor, I think the whole government needs to keep an eye on the federal government and be as cooperative as we can, while at the same time drawing a line with regard to autonomy and the home rule we have. You know, the home rule we have is limited. It's not entire. We don't appoint our judges. In fact, the president does. And right now there are 15 vacancies. One of those vacancies on the Court of Appeals is over 10 years. So it's not just President Trump. It's his predecessors. The federal government needs to appoint our judges.
So that was D.C. Council Chair Phil Mendelson speaking to Tom Fitzgerald on Fox 5's On the Hill yesterday, along with D.C. Council member Robert White. You heard Phil Mendelson mention the idea that some people have claimed that the president's show of force is a distraction. One of those people who have said that is Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy, who was speaking to Meet the Press yesterday and said that crime went up in D.C. while President Trump was in office. It came down when Joe Biden was president. He says Trump's takeover of D.C. policing is just a stunt to distract people and the press from his refusal to release the Epstein files and his upcoming massive health insurance premium hikes. Jim Loke is going to talk more about that coming up on the Final Five at 11:30. We'll also have much more on this coming up on Fox 5 at 10 and 11 after NFL football. Right now, the Commanders taking on the Cincinnati Bengals over on Fox 5 in preseason action. We'll be back here tomorrow night with all of the latest developments that happen on Tuesday and anything that happens overnight. Of course, we'll also be live streaming whenever anything happens as well. I'm producer Chris. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow night.
Your team has talked about Your team has talked about security guarantees. Could that involve U.S. troops? Would you roll that out in the future?
We'll let you know that maybe later today. We're meeting with 7 great leaders of great countries also, and we'll be talking about that.